Right. So, what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is to share things that I learned from my own journey, both in the field of endocrinology as well as wearing the second hat of entrepreneur in my field, and in the field of diabetes and the field of technology. So, you learn a little bit of my insights in both the fields, and in that sense, this is a broad-based talk where I'll try to give you insights from both the fields. So who am I basically? I am an endocrinologist. Who is an endocrinologist? Endocrinologist is a doctor who deals with diabetes, thyroid, and hormonal problem. We deal with chronic disorders like diabetes, where you need a good strong follow-up with the patients for a long period of time. So that's my domain expertise in terms of medical field. But apart from that, I'm also an entrepreneur. I've co-founded the Mellitus Healthcare. This was, well, not my first company, but I founded my first company just out of school called creativejuice.org long time back in 2002, where technology was still very early during that field. In fact, a lot of you might not even, some of you listening might be, really young at that age as well. I'm also a little bit of a tech developer. I can code in Python, and this I think has helped me a lot. I think so again, if you have any doctors or doctorpreneurs listening to this, I think it's very important that you learn one computer language. And if you have to learn one, I think Python is something I would recommend, because looking at how AI development is taking place, a lot of it is through Python. So I think, if you are, I'm also a big proponent of the no code revolution. I really think that, a lot of doctors and healthcare entrepreneurs can benefit with, engaging in this system even without coding. But I think, a little bit of learning, a little bit of code really helps the matter, and it helps you build a lot of things like we have done in my own practice, in my own field. I'm also an evangelist for AI. I think AI is there to take over the world. I think I'm very much for AI in that regards. And I think, the AI, there's a lot of talk that, there used to be an AI winter. I think the AI winter is over, and I think the spring is here. So this is a time to really spring in to the field of AI. So if you are developing anything in the field of, technology or healthcare technology, I think, you need to have a little bit of AI ka tadka. That is what I'd like to say. A little bit tinge of AI in your, product that you're developing, which is really going to transform how, it is being perceived, not only in the tech field as well as in the healthcare field. Okay, so enough about myself. We are here to talk about principles instead of people. And here are a few things which I've learned over a period of time, both as a doctor as well as an entrepreneur, as well as a tech developer. There are a little bit of things which I would like to share, which I hope is useful to anybody who is listening to this. So there are four first principles, I would say, of my life and career, four basic pillars of how I perceive the world, or how I look at things in my own life and career. There's a concept of master of two. I'll discuss this concept a little bit. I also believe in bit by bit development. Remember, how they often say, how do you eat an elephant? Well, it's one bite at a time. Really can't change the world in a day. In fact, Rome wasn't built in a day. Neither is any of the great products that you see in the market today. It takes time. It takes time for a product to be developed. It takes time for it to mature. It takes time for it to, sometimes, you are thinking ahead of time. If you're building something, if you're working towards something, if your company is working towards something, sometimes, remember, you could be ahead of your time. So you need to be patient. You need to take it step by step by step. And, doing a little bit, of the work at a time, it's really going to help you build something which is mega, which is really great. I always also believe that no matter what you do, whether you're having a 9-to-5 job, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're working for a startup, whether you're a doctor, you always should have a side hustle. There should be something on the side which you're developing, maybe for yourself. It could be for yourself, it could be for a client, it could be for your family member, but you should have something on the side. There should always be a side hustle. There has to be, that's what keeps everybody going. And the best innovations on this planet, whether it's in the healthcare field or whether it's in the technology field, have come through a side hustle, right? If you talk about vaccines, if you talk about penicillin, you talk about an angiography, everything has come as a side hustle in the medical field as well as in the tech field as well. And I'm also a firm believer of sharing knowledge. I think it's very, very important. See, it often happens in contrary to lot of what people think. In the medical field, people often get into silos, and people stop teaching others. They feel that there is a competitive advantage they have which they do not want to share with others. So I think I'm completely against that. I think it's very, very important that anything you learn, whether it is a new about a new medication, about a new technique, about a new surgical technique, or if you're in the tech field, if it's about a new technology, it's always very important that you share what you learn, you teach others what you learn. Teaching something really opens avenues for you. It will give you more opportunities to engage with people who are like-minded, who might be sometimes even be smarter than you, who might be able to really help you push towards something which is really helpful. So I think these are the 4 fundamental principles on which my life is governed, and these are some things which are a little bit which could help you as well as an entrepreneur or as a tech developer in your field as well. Okay, so moving ahead. Yeah, so this is a very important concept which I believe in, and that is the concept of master of two. You'd all have said, heard this term, jack of all trades, master of none, right? Or what I believe is that I think this concept is wrong. You can't be a jack of all trade and master of none. You can't be a master of one trade and jack of none. You need to be, and what we really need in today's world is be master of two. You need to have one primary skill and one additional co-primary skill which you need to develop, right? This is very, very important. Now, see, if let's say you're a doctor, let's say you're a surgeon, right? It's very much impossible for you to become the best surgeon in the world, right? You might obviously try to do that, but it's not going to happen, right? Because remember, in your field, no matter how hard you try, there'll always be somebody who will be better than you, right? There's always somebody who is there to take your position away, right? So it's always better for if you want to develop a unique selling proposition, a USP, be a master of two fields. You could be a very good doctor and you could be a very good speaker, right? That's an additional skill. You could be a very good doctor. You could have a good additional, speaking skills. You could have an additional teaching skills. If you're an entrepreneur, right? If you're a tech developer, right? If you're a coder in Python, maybe you're very good at cloud computing, right? So you need to have two skills which are very important. And remember, combining these two skills, for example, in my case, the knowledge and the skill in healthcare, combining with my knowledge and skill in technology, has helped me, come out with a unique USP situation for me, right? That you are able to, straddle upon two different worlds, understand both their problems, and try to find a common solution, and that really helps. So if you have more than one skill, right? If you don't, you must develop one. If you do, it's something which is very, very important, and that's why you'd have seen a lot of people from the engineering background try to take up management, try to learn something, try to do a PhD, right, in a particular field. Same, in the medical field as well. So it's very, very important that you develop two primary skills, and this, maybe you can have more, but I think this is very fundamental that you develop two, and that is really something which is going to help you stand out from the crowd, which is, I think, very, very important in today's world. And here comes the point about incremental development, the point about bit by bit development. So like I said, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? And remember, things are there is nothing on this planet which is made in a single go, right? Everything is built by bits and pieces, right? If you want to build a building, you need bricks. Now bricks are built somewhere else, right? You need cement. Cement is made somewhere else. The same way, if you're building a tech product, you need the ingredients which are right. You need good ingredients. Or if you don't have good ingredients, you need to develop them. You need to develop small bits and pieces. So start start developing something as a side hustle in a small bits and pieces way, right? Make start with small projects, start with small components of what you're trying to build, right? If you're, let's say, building a EMR prescription system, start with a small AI-based prescription outcome. You could have a small segment where you just collect the patient data, right? You could have a separate small little bit of coding there in the development part of the app, right? You could make a little bit of innovation in the cloud computing where you could protect the patient data, right? So do bit by bit development. I think that is very, very important. Always think big, but work in small parts, right? Your vision should be very clear, your broad vision, your grand vision, in whatever you're developing or whatever you're working towards. It could be getting a super specialty degree in your medical field. Work towards that grand vision, right? Look towards that, but at the same time, you start making small parts, right? If you're preparing for an exam, maybe start reading a chapter a day, right? If you're preparing for some entrance exam, you could start looking at some previous year's questions. Whatever you do, right? No matter what you do, it's very important that you start looking at small parts of it, right? And then working towards that. So I think this is something which is, again, fundamentally what I've learned over a period of time, and that is something which I believe that it could help you as well. Okay, now let's talk about the main point which we are discussing today, and that is the fundamental principles of how healthcare and technology really integrate with each other. So we'll discuss some important fundamentals about healthcare and technology. From my perspective, remember, what I'm going to talk about is a personal opinion. You can quote me on that, but at the same time, it's a personal opinion, I hold by my opinion, but at the same time, it's not something which is coming from not from my employer, not from my company. It's coming from a personal opinion. Could have an element of a personal bias as well, but that's what I've learned. I think this topic is basically what I've learned over a period of time, and that's what I'm really going to discuss. Okay, so this is one important, if you're whatever you are doing in the field of technology, this is one very important concept you have to understand, that tech adoption in the healthcare field by both doctors and patients is slower than you think, right? The tech adoption, and that's why I think the importance of organizations like this is very, very vital, because the problem is that there is a challenge. There is a challenge. You all know this diffusion of innovation curve, where you have some innovators and then you have some early adopters, but then there's a big gap between that, and then you have the early majority. Where does the doctors in the healthcare field? It's generally late majority or the laggards, right? If you see any technology, whether you see, it takes little time. So diffusion of innovation in the healthcare field really takes time. I'm sorry to say, but this is the reality, right? It's a very traditional kind of workspace. The incentives are also very traditional, very basic, very core, and because of that, often the tech adoption I am a consultant to a few healthcare companies, healthcare technology companies, and this is a common frustration which a lot of these companies have, that doctors are not taking this up, the patients are not really taking up this. It's such a great technology, it's such a great innovation that we have done, and yet why is there no takers for this? Why is nobody really picking this up? That is because you need to understand that fundamentally in the healthcare world, maybe I could be different. I'm not the typical client, right? Or maybe my patients are not your typical patients. The general public, right, is a late majority group, or the laggards, who are really slow in taking up innovation, and that's why tech adoption is little slow in the healthcare field. And you need to have patience. In fact, remember, it is really worth spending that little extra time and making that little extra effort, because in the end, the rewards are going to be great, right? You will be rewarded not only in terms of doing a great work in terms of business, but you'll also be rewarded in terms of humanity, because you'll be doing a work which really impacts the lives of the people whom you love, right? I think at the end of the day, who are we rather than servants of the public, right? That's something which is very important, right? So the healthcare field is extremely rewarding, but it's a little slow, right? And you need to have that patience, and you need to spend that extra time, extra effort to really develop something in the healthcare field. Whereas if you take anything like an ed tech or a fintech, things are much faster. But this is something which takes a little time in terms of the development. So this is, you need to have that extra time and patience. Another very important, I think this is fundamental and key, and this is where I often find a challenge in the field of healthcare. There are a lot of innovations in the healthcare field, but healthcare can only take up innovation when it is backed by evidence, right? Currently, the entire medicine has shifted to what is known as an evidence-based practice, or EBP. Now, an evidence-based practice takes three broad concepts into account. It takes the best scientific evidence, it takes the clinical experience of the doctors and the healthcare providers, and it also includes the patient values. And when you have these three combined, you have what is known as an evidence-based practice, and that is something which is important, right? So anything you develop, whether or any innovation that you have in the healthcare field, you'd have seen, at least in the West, if you have any VCs, or if you'd have seen Shark Tank, in the West, for those who are not, used to VCs. If you have anything in the healthcare field, any innovation in the healthcare field, the first thing they'll ask you, is this FDA approved? Is this approved by regulators? Do you have any evidence? Do you have any data? Have you done a scientific study? These are all very important questions which VCs are going to ask you. If there's somebody who is investing in the field, if there's somebody who is looking at innovating in the field, they will require scientific evidence. Without scientific evidence, the things will collapse, because the world, remember, healthcare is an extremely regulated industry. This is very important for everybody to understand. It's a very, very well regulated industry. If you need a break in this industry, you need to have scientific evidence and you need to have a scientific mindset. It cannot be that, I tried this product and it's great for me. It could work in any other field. It could work in the apparel field. It could work in the fashion industry. It could work in a basic technology industry, but it doesn't work in healthcare. In healthcare, you need a good scientific data, good scientific evidence, and only then will there be a mass adoption of your technology. Otherwise, it's going to fall flat. There would be a few early adopters who will take it up, but it's not going to really grow as you wish for it to grow. So it's very important to work with the adequate stakeholders to develop the best scientific evidence, right? And a good scientific evidence, good sound scientific evidence-based practice, evidence-based system which you develop is going to be something which will give you an edge, which will give you a moat for developing something, and this is something which is really going to help you out. So this, I think, is a very important fundamental principle which you have to understand, and you have to look at it in a broad way. Another very important concept which I look at which is very important, is that currently in the healthcare system, low cost, you need to provide it at a low cost, no doubt, right? We are all looking at industry disruptors. We are all looking at a disruption model where we are able to provide something at a low cost. But in healthcare, you cannot compromise on quality. You cannot compromise quality. This is very, very important. In the end, I'm going to give you some case studies of some startups which are working in this field, and I'll tell you some examples of what is wrong with a particular startup. Right? You provide something at a low cost, without a doubt, right? But a low cost does not mean low quality, right? We all know that, perhaps we know that principle that, you can't have good quality, you can't have good, everything. But in healthcare, you have to make it work. You have to make it something which is at a low cost, but the quality is not compromised. As long as the quality of care is not compromised, you are doing a good job. As long as you have developed scientific evidence, you are doing a good job. If you are not doing that, if you are compromising quality, the problem is that on a long term, the patients are going to suffer, or your clientele is going to suffer, and because of that, it's going to give a bad rap to your product or to your service which you are going to develop. So it's very important that while you try to aim to achieve a low cost, please make sure that you do not compromise on quality, do not compromise on safety in situation of healthcare, right? Safety, quality is paramount, right? It is quintessential that this is included, and without that, no product really should go through in terms of the healthcare field. This is very, very important, and this is extremely essential. Remember, like I discussed this earlier, healthcare technology is a marathon, it's not a sprint. If you are looking at investing into the healthcare space, if you are looking, think of it in a long-term way. Think of it as a humanitarian effort as well, rather than just a money-making prospect. There has to be an element of humanitarianism. There has to be an element of service in this field, right? Without that, whether you're a doctor, whether you're an entrepreneur, it's not going to work, right? You need to have that element. Remember, there are a lot of things which a healthcare entrepreneur is going to compromise, is going to, will have to give up, because remember, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. The outcomes in a healthcare world are much slower compared to fintech, compared to edtech, right? If you don't have that patience, and if you don't have that mindset of doing good for the people, perhaps I think, healthcare entrepreneurship is not for you. I think you perhaps should look at other fields. This is very important again to understand and to appreciate. Okay. Then let's look at, so this was some fundamental principles about healthcare and technology. And in the last few slides, I'm going to give you some case studies to tell you about some, I'll not name the startups, I'll name, good ones, but, a couple of startups that I feel, are doing the right thing. Some of them are not doing the right thing, and some of them are really on the wrong track. So that's the good, bad, and ugly of the healthcare technology space. And that's something, I'd like to perhaps, discuss in the next 3 or 4 slides. Okay. Let's look at good, right? So I think, one example of a good technology company, right, in the medical healthcare space, perhaps you can even say this is an ed tech. You might argue that this is perhaps not a pure medical technology company, but it's an ed tech company. There is a company called Marrow. There's it's basically, a provider for postgraduate teaching, right? Now this Marrow basically came up at a time when most of the postgraduate coaching was in the form of, so again, if you're not aware, MBBS, to become a doctor in India, first you do an MBBS, that is the master's, that is the undergraduate, and then you'll go for masters, and masters would, you become a physician or a surgeon or a, or a gynec or a ENT, right? So you'll take that up. That's the next step, that is the post-graduation. And for that MBBS to post-graduation, you have to give an entrance exam called the postgraduate entrance exam, which is now called the NEET PG. So Marrow first came into this field when, most of the thing was dominated by a traditional teaching approach. So you used to have classrooms based teaching, where, a lot of people would often, especially I think I lived during that time in Delhi, you had students, conglomerating at Karol Bagh and, Rajendra, area place and all that, you had those people, a lot of PG coaching classes there. So these people actually disrupted by saying that, we'll have this now, things are changing, let's have an online model of teaching. And then they did very well. I think it's one of currently the leading provider of postgraduate teaching courses in the country right now. And it's an example of a very well-timed, well thought of product, right, or a company, which is Marrow, I think. And again, the medical education tech, the med ed tech, which I think is the hottest space if you want to develop something in this field in India, right? This is something which I really feel, especially with the advent of AI, this is a product, this is something which you could develop very well, and I think this is something, which we should really be aiming at. So if you're not sure of what you want to develop in the healthcare field, this is an area which you should really be looking at, because this is really hot, and this is something, which along with, like I said, with the coming of AI, this is actually ripe for disruption also. So this is a very appropriate space to look at. So this is something, I feel is an example of a well done, well thought of company. Now I'll tell you the bad, right? And there are now so many diabetes reversal, quote unquote, programs, right? Some of them run by big, some of them backed by big companies, huge companies, in fact, right? The problem is this is one of the example of the evidence-based practice gone wrong. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes is reversible, right? I think the word here is not reversal, the word here is remission. So a patient with type 2 diabetes can undergo remission. It is possible. But currently it has been proven by only a handful of studies. Most of these studies were done in UK, very few studies done in India, right? And this handful of studies, in that handful of studies, they could possibly achieve remission for a small period of 2 to 3 years, only in about 50% of the patients, right? It was possible, and it was done through a particular regime which was followed, which is very difficult to follow in day-to-day life, in real life practice. So in fact, I was one of the early proponents of diabetes remission in India, right? You would have seen some of our earlier videos also on this topic. We had written some review articles as well. We have actually been working towards this for a long time. But diabetes remission is not currently. It is still a research project. It is not a product. It is not something which should be kept out in the as a product. It is not something, if you're a VC, if you're an investor, you are on the wrong track. What happens here is that these patients will not undergo remission. Right? I'm telling you this wearing my endocrinologist hat, and unfortunately things will fall flat, and then patients will go on a wrong track, and there'll be some disastrous consequences of this, right? So this diabetes reversal thing is something which has to stop. Right? I don't think this is something where you should have further investment without really understanding the science behind it. And before you understand the science behind it, this is something which has to kind of be curtailed. So this is an example of I told you that you need to have a strong evidence in the medical field, and before generating a self evidence of your own methodology, you cannot really put this out in that. Some of these things are actually very expensive also. They cost a lot of money, and I think this is something we need to really be careful, and we need to consider. There has to be some regulation behind this. The ugly part, right? Again, I'll not name the company for obvious reasons, but this is a company where I feel this is completely on the wrong track. So this is a healthcare company which basically simplifies this is what the company claims, that it's a new age healthcare company that simplifies the surgical journey for the patient. What it does is basically provides surgical support, right? So it helps to identify the right surgeon, and then as a full step kind of thing for ensuring surgical care, right? Great concept wise, it is great, right? The problem is, what happens is that this is one of those problems where they are trying to look at racing at the bottom, right? You know that concept of race to the bottom, right? You try to keep providing things at a cheaper and a cheaper and a cheaper cost, right? This is what this company is trying to do. It's trying to create a price war in a sense at a lower price, right? It is trying to create a market where price is curtailed, prices is locked. This is a bad precedent, not only for the current period but also for the future. What happens is, remember, surgery is something, this is where you cannot compromise on quality. That's why I said, there is an element where no matter what you do in the healthcare space, you need to ensure that the quality of care is ensured, right? Quality of care is not compromised. A surgeon who is extremely experienced, who has been operating for a long period of time, remember, a surgeon is going to have a limited time span, right? He's going to be able to operate, let's say, 2 or 3 surgeries a day. How many surgeries can he do, right? You will have a limitation of time, right? Obviously, as his clientele increases, as his number, as his experience increases, as his results are better, there are more and more people who are going to come to him, and he or she is going to charge more money for it, right? Remember, this is he is charging for his experience, for his surgical skills. Maybe somebody who does it at a cheaper cost is a product in itself, that look, I'm not as experienced as surgeon A, but surgeon A is not going to operate you because there's a long waiting period. I'm not that bad. I could do it at a cheaper cost, but I'll give you the similar result. But if you keep going down, keep trying to make it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, there's an inflection point at one point where both the surgeon, the administration, the hospital, everybody is trying to cut costs, cut corners, and by cutting costs and cutting corners, they are then compromising in the quality, right? This, some of these things actually happen in the US. If you see the US healthcare model, where again there is a race to the bottom from insurance companies, because insurance companies are trying to curtail the cost of treatment, and because they are trying to curtail the cost of treatment, to some level, that is great. It is good for everybody, both for the healthcare industry as well as for the patients, for the insurance companies and for the tech providers. It's good because it keeps things in the check. But if this becomes a race to the bottom, that is what it's really happening here. It's really going to compromise the quality of care, right? Some of these places you can't cut corners, right? I can't make a Boeing aircraft which has only one pilot because I want to cut cost, or which doesn't have all know what happened to places where costs were cut, and the recent example of, let's say, Ocean Gate, and the original example of Titanic, and so on, right? If you're trying to cut cost, or if you're trying to do something which otherwise should not have been done, where safety is compromised, this really affects the healthcare business and healthcare technology. So no matter what you develop, it's very important. You might make a product which is cheaper, which is more affordable. Absolutely, be a guest, please do that. But make sure that the quality is not compromised, and there should be absolutely no compromise in quality, because this is quintessential that the quality of care is not affected, because you are dealing with the lives of the people, and you are dealing with something which is extremely valuable. Maybe if you lose money, maybe you'll earn it again, but if you lose your life, you're not going to get it back. So that's something which is very, very important to understand. So these are some fundamental principles which I work towards. As a company, we are developing, working on these 3 products. We are making something called endoai.co.in, which is our AI model for endocrinology. We are making a precision medicine engine called diabetology.co.in, and we are working towards using this precision medicine engine in our online diabetes care platform called diabetesonline.in. Right. So these are some of the products that we are developing as a company, but mainly our company works as a bridge. So Malaitis Healthcare LLP is like a bridge between healthcare and technology. So we do 2 things. We make tech products for doctors, hospitals, and healthcare companies. So if you are a doctor, want to make your own app, want to make your own AI model, right? We are the guys who will do this for you. But we also also look at the other side of it, where if you're a healthcare technology company and you want to have more insight into the into the medical field, we provide consultation and connections for technology companies to venture into healthcare. We talked about a few things here. We talked about carrying out clinical studies. We talked about having clinical immersion in this field. If you're looking at these things, if you want to understand a lot of things from the medical side, and from the patient perspective, we are again somewhere we can help you in that, right? So this is how you can reach out to me. This is my email address, dromlakhani@gmail.com. I'm there on Twitter and also on LinkedIn, right? So you can reach out to me, and we can have a word on this, right? So I